what would be some really wacky ones? you see what I'm saying? I mean, are there other? I mean, along the same lines of what we were talking about a few minutes ago about, what about somebody who's read every Jewish writer ever? What would be some, like, if you were to invent a set of alternate criteria, or if somebody was, what would they be? And are there other fields of judging these kinds of things?
I'm sure there are, but do you think they would mean anything in, like, for 200 years of Jewish history? Do you think, like, say, reading 5 or more Jewish-themed novels a year would mean much for maintaining a separate group identity over generations? Or whatever out-of-the-box measures? Do you think they would mean much?
I don't know. I certainly don't want to argue too stringently that they would, but I wonder. I just wonder how else these things could be looked at, and I also think that from any fixed point in history, it's pretty hard to predict what the future is going to look like and what's going to be important in it.
Yeah.
So, which is not to say that reading Hebrew is going to turn out to be irrelevant, or that intermarriage is going to turn out to be irrelevant. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an alternate vision, I guess.
What do you?
What?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't going to say anything of anything.
Here's another sentence from Edward Shapiro that I wanted to bounce off you. In academia, there is not one black scholar, apart from Julius Lester, a convert to Judaism, whose major field of interest is Jewish studies. While converse, there are all these Jews studying various forms of black culture. What do you think about that?
Well, for starters, I'd say it's not true. I think that there are any number of black scholars that I have read or that I'm personally acquainted with who are, very interested in, perhaps not in the way that he would be looking for, but I would say, look for instance at Cornel West and Higginbotham's book about blacks and Jews, or the work of pretty much every black scholar I can think of is pretty well versed in Judaism and in black Jewish relations. I mean, I do a talk with Bakari Kitwana sometimes about blacks and Jews, and I think that I wonder in what way Shapiro is looking for, how he's defining an interest in Judaism. I think there have been any number of works that look particularly at relations between the two communities. What do you think his criteria is?
Well, I think he's saying Jewish studies, so meaning the specific department of Jewish studies. So
well, I guess that was
like,
yeah. My first question would be, how possible or plausible is it to be a black scholar and get a job in Jewish studies? Is that a career path that you think makes any sense?
I'd never heard of
the hard, just the hard facts of can you get a job? Because folks coming out of PhD programs are hard pressed to get jobs. I've got tons of friends who are coming out and having to ask whether they're willing to move to Kansas to work.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I really wonder about the feasibility of being a black scholar in Jewish studies and getting a job and getting tenure and being at a university. I think it would be a tremendously difficult path to take as a career.
Do you think there'd be more advantages or disadvantages to being a black scholar with, say, a PhD in medieval Jewish literature to getting tenure in Jewish studies?
I would think that it would be a disadvantage. I think there'd be enough resistance to it, whether sort of spoken or unspoken, that it would be tough. And that may fly in the face of what one might assume about universities looking for diversity. But I think that I would think it would be very hard. That's my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
I would tend to have the opposite view, but I don't really have any knowledge. So.
Yeah, no, this is highly speculative, of course.
Yeah.
But I do think, to widen the lens a little bit, what I see is folks. I'm 32, so I see a lot of people of my generation either in the middle of getting their degrees or sort of coming out of the academy and looking around for work, or going back and deciding what their focus is going to be. And I think that people are savvy enough in the academy to study things that they think they're going to be able to work in, which is partly why so many people are doing hip-hop related stuff now, because there's a real appetite for it coming out of school. If you're a young black scholar, doing hip-hop stuff is going to be an easier path to a job, largely because of identity politics, and the fact that, within that field, black is a signifier of authenticity than anything else. I also know plenty of white scholars who are working in fields like black studies or American studies with a focus on African American literature or whatever, and I think identity politics in the academy are really still a major issue in a lot of fields, and I think that the climb for a black scholar into a Jewish studies department would be significant. Especially, I don't know how many schools have Jewish studies departments and what percentage of those schools are in themselves predominantly Jewish. It'd be interesting to look at that. But yeah, I really think that part of what Shapiro was talking about might truly be traceable to, first, just the practical realities of life in the academy, and second, the question of why a black scholar would want to exclusively focus on Jewish studies without crossing that over with an area like black-Jewish relations. I think that when scholarly work becomes so divorced from one's own experience and one's own perspective, it runs the risk of becoming esoteric. It runs the risk of becoming irrelevant. And I think that the struggle for black academics to get a foothold in academia has been so profound, and in many ways is so connected, much more connected than other groups, to a sense of what does this mean, what does this translate into practically, how does my work translate into something of, quantifiable significance, that to study something utterly esoteric is a bold move that would have political and professional repercussions in some ways. The scholars I know who are black who do stuff that's totally unconnected in any way to blackness are constantly having to answer for it. A good friend of mine is at the Yale Divinity School, and he is, his work is on Kant and Erasmus, and he's sort of constantly having to struggle to explain why, a 38-year-old black man is studying those things as opposed to something else,
Yes. I want to bounce one more sentence off you. Jews needed blacks to authenticate their image of themselves as liberals, but blacks did not need Jews to authenticate their image of themselves as blacks. What do you think of that?
Blacks did not Jews. Well, is this Shapiro again?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the parallelism of that statement, or rather the lack of it, is the first thing that sort of strikes me, even beyond the argument being made. The equation of Jewish to liberal versus the equation of black to black, at first glance anyway, doesn't really appear to make much sense. If that is in fact sort of an attempt at a parallelism. But I think that I think the interplay is a lot more complicated than that. From Al Jolson singing in blackface to more recent stuff like the number of Jewish rap artists who have relied on the authenticating presence of black producers or collaborators for their work. I think that these terms are much more mutable than they appear. And I think that authentication of blackness, authentication of liberalism, these things cannot really be separated from each other. Bernard Malamud's novel *The Tenants*, I think, is actually a great example of this, which is about a black and a Jewish writer and the relationship that they have in the 70s at sort of a black power moment in New York when they're both